Hello and welcome to another tutorial of Godot. I hope you're all doing fine. Today we'll be talking about the collisions in 2D. It's a follow-up on a previous tutorial I made, and I'm also using a similar scene from another tutorial. So I already prepared some stuff and I will go pretty quick over it. If you want to have more deep explanation, you can check my previous tutorial. I'll put it in the link. So yeah, let's get started. In this scene, you are currently seeing the four different collision objects, 2D. So that are actually the base nodes, so which are being used or being inherited by the others. We have like four different ones. We have for the player, it's called a CharacterBody2D, the enemy has a RigidBody2D, and the mushroom has an area 2D. And we're still missing one, and that's the static body 2D. They all have their different meanings and things to use for, so let's have a quick look at those first. If you right click on them and you would check the type itself, it says here, for example, a 2D physics body that can be moved by external forces. When moved manually, it doesn't affect other bodies in a path. So this is just as it says, it's static, it has to do nothing else, it stays there, it's ideally for platforms, something like that. On the other side, you have a player. The player node itself is like CharacterBody2D. If we go to the type, you will also see that it says a 2D physics body specialized for character moved by script. So I also recommend to use this when you have a player and you need to use collision physics for that. What you can note is instead of the collision object 2D in this case, which also had the static body 2D, it also has a physics body 2D. So that's also to use the physics system of Godot on this one. Okay, remember that. Let's go to the next one, the enemy, which is a rigid body 2D. And if you check this one, it says a 2D physics body that is moved by physics simulation. And as you may see here as well, it also has a physics body 2D, so physics are applied on the rigid body 2D as well if you want. Okay, and the last one, but not the least one, is the area 2D. This is just an object that we placed in the other scene. If you check the type, it says a region of 2D space that detects other collision objects entering or exiting. And this just comes from the collision object 2D, which is nice, of course. So let's have a quick look. If I go back to the test scene and I would like run the scene, we will see that I can move. So my character is moving, I can jump on the head of the enemy, which is quite nice, and I can just pass here, and you see that the message in the back is saying entered right here. That's because I configured so. So anytime I enter this area, I'm going to send out a message. So we could essentially replace it with our own logic. Yeah. When I jump on one from the enemy, so the NPC here, it does nothing. There's a reason for that, and I will get to that in a bit. First, I want to go back into the scene and have a talk about the collision here. So there's a collision menu, and the collision menu has a layer and a mask. The layer is actually in which layer this object, player, enemy, mushroom, whatever is in. And the mask is actually with what it collides. Maybe to give a better example, let's have a look at the players. And the player here has it as well, collision. This one is in the player layer, and it actually collides with the world, which allows us to actually stand on that platform that you saw just now, but it also collides with an enemy. So the enemy means that we can have this character deal damage whenever they collide with each other. Okay. The mushroom, for example, is in layer objects and can collide with a player. So this one will only collide with a player, and that's why we saw the message before as well. Quick tip, always name your layers. You can just right click, rename layer, and just give this a name. So if I put name here, rename, some example, but the layer is now named name, and that makes things organized for us. If you look at my layers, I have a world, a player, an object, and an enemy layer. So in that way, you can keep things consistent and you know what you're working with. Okay, then as you can see here in the mushroom, I have a lot of collision shapes to these. This is just pure as an example. If you want, you can make your collision shapes as detailed as you want. So if you want to increase the way that collision works for one object, you just add more collision shapes, and they will all act based on your area 2D settings right here. which is very nice in my opinion. Okay, now let's get to the coding. I'll be using .NET. If you use GDScript, it's almost similar, but for this one, again, I'm using .NET. Let's go to it, to my editor. I already prepared something. I have a mushroom here, and in the mushroom, I have an area 2D. I'm going to go through it quickly and explain you quickly how it works. So first, we're going to get the node that is called area 2D. We have the node, and this node actually has a method named bodyEntered, which is being triggered. So when this one is being triggered, we want to do an action on that. And we will do that by adding this method. So if bodyEntered is triggered, we want that onBodyEntered is being executed, and that's what's happening. So that's what you saw before as well, the entered message. But if you really want, we could make it specific. So imagine that our body is a player, and we just will define it as well. Then if it's a player, actually I want that the player takes damage. So let's say it's a poisonous mushroom, and the player will take damage each time it enters it. Of course, I just make this method on the player as well, but if we look here, I'm just going to say print take damage, and we could replace this with something that deals damage to the player in the real implementation, but for the sake of this tutorial, let's not do that. So in case if my player now enters the mushroom, you will see that it takes damage. And here we go, take damage. So it's a player, and we're taking damage. In that way, it's very easy to work with the collisions, and other collision object 2Ds also work in the same way. If we look at our enemy, you could do the same. So we have a rigid body, we're getting the nodes. When we do like, or well, let's say that when the player does a bodyEntered, then we want to act on it. And we say on bodyEntered, we want to do an action. So in this case, we'll say entered, but maybe entered is a wrong name because we already have it. But let's do it like this. And now I'm going to come back on a point I want to discuss before. So if we stand on it, you see that entered, so enemy entered is not working. And that's actually because there is an issue. There is an issue with, there's a bug open on the Godot pull request, or on their page that is not a pull request yet. I think it's still open. That if you have a CharacterBody2D and it collides with a RigidBody2D, that the collision is not detected, which is a bit annoying because you expect it to work, right? So there are workarounds for this. So, but just know that if you want to try to create this, that it does not work at this moment, but you can work around with it. So I would say do that, work around until they fix it. So I will pass the link in the description just that you know about it. Okay, so, but aside from that, this script would do the same, but at this moment it doesn't work. And I think that we're already at the end because this is simply how the collisions work. Maybe I can still show you something else. So about the mask layer, like if the mask layer is not defined properly, you will know it. So just to show you the example of having the player not collide with the world, and the world in this case has a static body 2D, and there's a world here, and collides with the player, but the player does not collide with the world anymore. So that means that the player doesn't care about it and will just fall through. So this is exactly why you need to define them correctly. Otherwise, if there's no collision detection, it will ignore it and just, fall through it, and you cannot execute your scripts on it. Of course, you can always use some manual things to do so, but I just recommend to use the system of Godot because that's just a nice way it is. And maybe for your information, this is a collision shape that goes behind the static body 2D. Collision shapes, they come in all sizes and forms. So just for your example, you have a circle, rectangle, capsule, and then you have some special cases like convex polygon shape, concave polygon shape. But let's not get into detail right now. Check them out yourselves, play around with them. see how it goes for you, and yeah, that's it. I really hope that you enjoyed this very short introduction to it. If you have questions, feel free to ask them, and I definitely hope to see you soon. So bye bye.